So a day off is all right, and the idea would be, to get maximum benefit out of these talks, you should really try to stay in a contemplative frame of mind, obviously. Meditating, studying the scripture, reading the text on your day off. Going to the temple is always nice, great contemplative place. And just generally thinking of your whole stay here as a sadhana, as a spiritual practice. Not getting involved in the chit-chat in the cafes and all of that if you can avoid it. As you may have noticed, there's a whole scene here going on of what you might call spiritual poseurs. Good people, but basically here for, well, a good time, a spiritual good time. And, in reference to that, one thing I need to remark too, just came to mind. I never said this before, but I'm still going to say it this year. Vedanta is a means of self-knowledge, and it works, for sure. And part of the reason it works is because we have a scripture. It's scripture-based tradition, and this scripture has shown itself to be infallible. In other words, the teachings here and the logic here has never been refuted. In India, they used to have great debates that were financed by the kings. And all of the spiritual people and worldly people and philosophical people, India's had a great tradition of intellectual brilliance in all levels, science, in all levels. Great thinkers came from here. And they used to have these great debates, particularly around the time when Buddhism was coming up. Buddhism, it seemed, was making inroads into the culture because Brahmanism had produced a lot of problems, very similar to the problems that were produced by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. When the Reformation came up, Buddha was a reformer, a reformed Hindu actually. And they had these great debates which followed certain rules. And a great Vedanta teacher named Shankara, whose text we're going to take as an introductory text, basically defeated everybody. And it was a huge revival of Hinduism. His opponents, the idea was you either surrendered to the truth and followed the truth, or you left India. And those Buddhists and those other people who couldn't compete, they just packed up and left. And so the Vedanta was reestablished as the truth of enlightenment, of the self, of reality, of the nature of reality. So, and part of that tradition involves criticism. And I know this is a very, very bad word, because everybody thinks that, or there's this notion in the spiritual world that when you're critical, you're judgmental. And you're not supposed to be judgmental. You're bad because you're making a judgment. Well, that's not true. We have an intellect because, for a particular reason, consciousness evolved an intellect for the purposes of making judgments, for critical thinking. We have that. That's the purpose of the intellect. That's the reason it's evolved. So we need to make judgments. We need to be critical in our thinking. And that involves critical of spiritual, quote-unquote, ideas, or bad ideas masquerading as the truth. And when I criticize an idea, I'm not, if there's a name in your mind associated with it, or if you have particular devotion for somebody who's presented that idea, mind you, I'm not attacking the person. I'm not attacking the devotion that you have for that person, or for their tradition, or for their teaching. Mind you, don't take it personally. It's not personal. I'm not against anybody. All people we see as the self. Everybody's just awareness. But awareness can have some dumb ideas. And those ideas need to be exposed. And if you will notice in our tradition, when we expose a bad idea, we'll give you the logic. Okay? There is a logic behind these criticisms. It's not just I like it or I don't like it. I'm not here to tell you what I think or feel. I'm very strong on my teaching, but it's only because I'm identified with this teaching. So what you're listening is not a personal opinion particularly, although my personal energy is behind that view, but this is the Scripture's view on these ideas that just don't work. Most of these ideas that we have, that we picked up in the spiritual world, there's always some truth to it. They wouldn't last if there wasn't some truth to them. But because they haven't been critically analyzed in light of what? Awareness and the nature of awareness, there's also some ignorance or untruth packed into those ideas. And spiritual people are, I hesitate to use the word gullible, but they want to give people the benefit of the doubt. They don't want to be critical. They want to have faith and devotion and believe that it's true, just like a religious person wants to believe in God. And so they'll glom onto the truth and ignore the ignorance that's associated with the truth. This is a problem, big problem. You read spiritual literature. I'm working on an article now for my blog about this, showing how you can have the truth and ignorance just woven so fine, so tightly woven, that in your desire to understand, you swallow the ignorance along with the truth, and you get confused. And Vedanta is very clear about that. So we have to pick apart some of these ideas. And that's going to be uncomfortable, mind you. But I'm not trying to upset you. But Vedanta is a provocative teaching. It's going to provoke you to think clearly. And we're going to give you what? The big idea that will allow you to make these criticisms on your own. Because our idea here is to make you the teacher. Your intellect, your mind should be the teacher. But your mind needs to think clearly and analytically and in a discriminative way so that what? You can do inquiry. You can't do inquiry if the ideas that you're using to do inquiry are fuzzy, if they haven't been properly vetted. So mind you, and I've got a bit of an edge, and I'm a little sarcastic sometimes. I'm sorry, just my personality. But mind you, I'm not against any gurus or any tradition. We're only against bad ideas. That's all. So don't say, well, Ramji's like this, and he doesn't like so-and-so, and he doesn't like this, and so forth and so on. There will be certain names that will come up in your mind, and I'll try to avoid saying those names. Although if I do, it's not because I'm talking about the name, it's just to point out the teaching, which most of you will be familiar with. Like Ramesh, for example, and I'm not the doer teaching. Most everybody, everybody pretty much knows about Ramesh and the I'm not the doer teaching? Probably, yeah. That's, and that's a good teaching, but it's a bad teaching. It's good, but so we have to understand what's the upside of it and what's the downside of it. That's all. And I'm not saying believe it or accept what I say. I'm saying think about it. In light of the logic of Vedanta, think about it and you choose for yourself what you think is the truth. We're not trying to push anything on you. Inquiry means you have to hear what's being said and then put it up against what you believe and sort it out in your own mind. So that leads to the next topic, which is how this works. How Vedanta works. It's important to understand this. Vedanta is called a Shabda Pramanam. Pramana means a means of knowledge, and Shabda means sound. Shabda means a sound, means words. Words are sounds. So it's a means of knowledge that's conveyed by words. Words are to be heard and hopefully listened to. Okay? Hopefully, you can hear things but not listen. You can you'll hear it, but it'll not register in your brain properly as it was transmitted. This is a huge problem. If you're not getting it, it's because you're probably not able to listen properly. If you notice, and I'm sure you have, in a conversation, when somebody makes a statement, makes a statement, and they have several sentences to say. They want to talk for a few minutes. Most everybody wants to talk for a few minutes, uninterrupted. As soon as you hear something that triggers a thought in your mind, you start forming your opinion or your judgment or your reaction or your contribution as soon as the words start coming out, as soon as the idea gets clear. And what that means is you're not listening for the rest of their conversation. This is where arguments start. A person may have a very nice thing to say and work it all out, but you hear something you don't like at the beginning, which is going to be qualified later. And you immediately say, no, that's not true. But I think, in your mind, and off you go, formulating your argument on your side, and you never hear the person out. This is just human nature, because everybody just wants to talk. They want to be noticed, they want to be heard. And they don't want to listen to other people. But in this tradition, if you were able to figure it out on your own, you'd have figured it out on your own. That's just a fact. So basically, and we're not saying you're stupid, but we're just saying you don't have enough information to figure it out on your own. So please allow us to give you that information. So when I say something, what's happening is you're going to have to manage your own mind. This is why it's hard. This is why Vedanta is very difficult. Because we come here with certain beliefs and opinions. We've got our own ideas, how it is, how reality is, who I am, what's going on, what the world is like. We have these ideas. And as soon as you hear an idea that contradicts your view or brings into question your view, it creates an agitation in your mind, and you switch off. It's the problem. And this teaching is logical. It's a complete teaching. It stretches out. I heard it for 2 years, from 4 in the morning till 12 at night. Every day from my guru. It's complete, and it's amazing. And so you need to give it the time, give me the time to work these ideas out, which means you're going to have to, when you come in the door, like you leave your sandals, try to set your ego and your thoughts and your opinions and your beliefs, set them aside if you can. It's going to be hard. This is why Vedanta is only for mature people. Really, only a mature person can set their own stuff aside and actually listen. That's a professional or mature person. If you go in business, particularly in big businesses, everybody's got their own opinions. But when they all sit down together, everybody has to put everything aside, and later on they're going to fight and hash it out. But everybody's got to listen to what the board of directors or the CEO or whatever it is says, right? Or it's just not going to work. It doesn't work, and you're out of business in no time if you can't listen. So it takes a certain discipline. Listening is a certain kind, is a discipline, definite discipline. Now we're not saying, throw it all out and forget it, because you can't do that anyway. It would be nice if you could just erase all the tapes and start fresh. You're not going to be able to erase all these tapes and start fresh. It's impossible. But you need to be able to set aside your beliefs and opinions long enough, right, to hear what's being said. That's the first stage. And then the second stage is called manana. First stage is called shravana. The second stage is called manana. And in the manana phase, manana means reflection, contemplation. In that phase, you look at what you think and feel in light of the teaching. And the teaching is what? If you understand the value of this teaching and you have faith in it and bhakti for it, you have to look at what you think and feel in light of what the teaching said and discard those bits of opinion and belief and ignorance that are not in harmony with the teaching. Not the other way around. A lot of people come to these classes, not a lot, because usually Vedanta selects the best people. We usually don't get many, but every year there's 2 or 3 smart people who are going to prove that this teaching, that their teaching's better, that what they know is better than this teaching. And so they only listen, what? To get ammunition to shoot down the teaching. Because they think what they know or they've learned or they've discovered or through their experiences or reading or whatever it is, they think that's the standard. And they're going to judge Vedanta to see if Vedanta stacks up to what they believe. And that's not going to work. It's not going to work. It just doesn't work. Last year we had 2 or 3. They're always usually men. They're usually in their 40s. They're usually very smart guys. Huh? They've been around a lot. They're very smart. And they studied all of it. And they've had lots of spiritual experiences. And I don't want to fight with anybody. Please don't argue with me because you can't win. Honestly, because I just argue from this point of view. If you actually listened and had an argument, in those days when Shankar and they were having these debates, it was called Dharma combat. And nobody beat Shankar and the Vedantins. Nobody. The Sankyans, the Charvakas, all of the Buddhists, none of them could come up with the arguments that could defeat the logic of this teaching. The logic's impeccable. Every single thing starts from a certain point of view that's unassailable. And then all the logic works out from this one truth. So unless you got an understanding of this one truth, your logic is going to fall down at some stage. There's going to be some inconsistency in the way you're thinking, the way you're understanding things, unless you understand what the self is. So listening is Shravana, Manana, and then Nididhyasana. That's the final stage. That's where you assimilate it. Through this dialogue that you have with the teaching in your mind, this dialogue's going on with your mind, don't let go of your belief and opinion until you're 100% sure you understand what the truth is. And then if you want to succeed, then you're going to have to let go of your belief or your opinion. You have to be willing to do that. Because truth is going to be the guide here, not what I believe. Because this is not religion. Vedanta is not religion. It's not a philosophy. We're not teaching you a philosophy. We're not teaching. We don't want you to believe anything. We're not ramming anything down your throat. We're presenting, but this mandala of existence, this picture of reality, getting that established, a vision of non-duality, getting that established in your mind clearly, so that you can get to work on your stuff. Because once that vision of non-duality is established, the only obstacles you have to the enlightenment are what? Your stuff. And if you want to be free, then you can discard your stuff in light of that. It's going to take time. It takes time to build up this teaching. It's a very slow and patient process. And we are going to use a text. We'll start this morning. We might as well start this morning. What the hell? And we'll get on with it. But it's a very patient and logical and consistent teaching from A to Z. And all the texts in Vedanta follow the same basic pattern. They'll present it in different ways. But you'll get the same basic A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right on up to Z every time. So it's important to come every day, think about it. And how many of you got my book? How many of you have read the book? Well, good. So I have a few books with me. I was only able to bring a few. And so if you would like a book, you can speak to me or Indica later, and we'll get you a book. But the talks, all the logic is laid out in the book. Obviously, if you read it, you pretty much understand what we're saying here. But I need to repeat it, not only for the new people. There's people here, very advanced people. There's some realized people in the audience also, people who already know who they are, who are just continuing to develop their understanding, purify their understanding, and they just enjoy hearing Vedanta because it's a beautiful teaching. But you can, understand that it's a complete teaching, and the more you put into it, the more attention you pay to it, and the more your knowledge gets firm, the better. Because one day the last doubt's going to go away about who you are. See here. Yeah. Okay, good. What else? Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Ganganasadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Narayanam Padmavam Vashishtam Shaktim Chatatputra Parasarancha Vyasam Sukham Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Matasya Shisham Sri Shankaracharya Matasya Padmaha Padam Chahastamalakancha Shisham Tam Totikam Bhartika Karamanyan Asmad Gurum Shantatam Anatoshmi Vishwam Darpana Drishyamanya Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyan Atmani Mayaya Bhaivurivod Bhutam Yata Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanameva Dvayam Tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om. Okay, good. This text is called Viveka Chudamani. It means crown jewel or the crest jewel of discrimination. And it unfolds the teaching of Vedanta, the essence of Jnana Yoga. It was written, there's some argument about who wrote it. Everyone agree that Shankaracharya wrote it, but he might as well have written it. Some say one of his disciples, Sureshwacharya, or one of his disciples wrote it. It doesn't matter, really, because it's just pure Vedanta. It's the finest expression of the teaching of Vedanta since God made the earth, really. Shankara never said he didn't invent this teaching, obviously. This is not his opinion. And there's nothing new here. None of the ideas are new. He himself said, I'm a link in the tradition, in the Vedanta Sampradaya. I'm a link to what? To the source, to the Upanishads. So all of the ideas that you find here are found in the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the source of the Vedanta. Vedanta means those texts that are at the end of each Veda. And that's Vedanta means end, Veda means knowledge. They're the texts at the end of the voluminous books of knowledge called the Vedas, and they are the knowledge that ends your quest for knowledge. The esoteric meaning is the knowledge that ends the quest for knowledge. If you get this understanding, you won't need to know anything ever again. That's the point. You will stop seeking, in other words. This is the knowledge that ends your seeking for knowledge. Doesn't mean you can't acquire other kinds of knowledge, but once you gain self-knowledge, that's it as far as you're seeking about who you are and what the reality is about. You could seek knowledge about art or literature or science or anything like that as a pastime. But you would never feel that you need to know anything ever again when you know yourself. So Shankara wrote this out, and there was nobody has done it better, has put it together in a more clear and concise way with all the logic, it all laid out step by step, and he is. In the 15th century, 14th century, there was a great Swami. He was one of the Shankara lineage. He was the head of the Sringeri Math in Karnataka. His name was Vidyaranya Swami. He wrote a great text that rivals this called Panchadasi. It's a little more advanced, a little more sophisticated arguments, more arguments involved there. Here he doesn't get into the arguments, the criticisms, the objections to the teachings. He just presents the teachings as they are, as they're meant to be used. And this is not considered an introductory text, incidentally. And I know it seems strange that usually I start with Tattva Bodh or Atma Bodh. Usually Tattva Bodh. But you people seem to be quite sophisticated. You've all read my book. The way it looks, you've been around the spiritual world for quite a while. You probably don't need to start with the ABCs again, although we're going to get the ABCs presented in a little more sophisticated way. So this book rolls Tattva Bodh and Atma Bodh into one and expands it a little more. It's a little larger canvas. The original text was about 560 verses. And as you know, these texts were not they're not airport reads. Yeah. Believe me, you're not just supposed to pick it up, 500 pages, let's, and start reading it through. This is not a novel or an adventure story. So they were meant to be unfolded in a certain way. Every verse needs to be explained or unfolded in a certain way. And in the old days, in the old style, they would take maybe 1 or 2 days for every verse to explain it. And it would go through it, and the people who were there had their whole life, basically. They had nothing else to do, So it would take a year, maybe, or two to unfold a text. But big deal, so what? Nobody was in a hurry, nobody had anything to worry about. They were Brahmins, they were adhikaris. Adhikari means highly qualified. Or they were sannyasis, they had nothing to do in the world. So they had plenty of time to listen. It could take all the time in the world to unfold it. So, this text means the crown jewel of discrimination. And it's going to teach us the discrimination between the self and the not self. That's the purpose of this text. There's only two categories in existence. Those two categories are the subject and the object. If you look at your own experience, there's just you, and there's objects appearing in you or to you. And all the suffering and sorrow and problems that come in life are a result of a confusion of the subject and the object. So, if you confuse yourself with an object, you're going to have problems. And that confusion we call superimposition. We have technical terms for all of these. But it's just a confusion. It's a projection that causes you to see a snake where there's only a rope. You all know the snake and the rope story, probably. That's a superimposition. That's projection. And because of that projection, the man feels what? Fear. This existential fear that we have, this fear, this anxiety that's driving us, is a result of this confusion of myself with the objects appearing in me. We're going to obviously have to find out what those objects are and why they're not you. If you understand that object's not you, you won't have a problem. But it's identification with an object that's appearing in you that's producing the problem. And that's based upon what? Ignorance of the distinction between the subject and the object, between awareness, me, and the objects appearing in me. So that's what the purpose of this. Don't be fooled by the big word, Viveka Chudamani. It's a jewel, it's a gem. Why? Because if you have this discrimination, you get the richest thing in the world, which is what? Lasting happiness, peace, freedom, moksha. Moksha means freedom. It sets you free of all your conflicts and suffering. That's the purpose. All Vedanta teaching is just for that reason. You know, you have all these guys now, the physics scientists are all they're all zeroing in on non-duality. Huh? You know that they're all just about to come, not all of them, but a lot of them. Say, oh, maybe reality is non-dual. And they got all this, huh? But so what? So what if they discover that reality is non-dual? So what? What good is that going to do anybody? Nothing. It's not going to do them one bit of good to discover that reality is non-dual. Because they'll have they're still going to fight with their wives. They're still going to complain about their taxes. Suffering's going to keep right going on. Everybody here knows reality is non-dual. Big deal. Huh? That's not any knowledge that we really need. We need to be able to separate ourselves from the objects appearing in us. So we need a means to what? Actualize non-duality. I was invited to give a talk on non-duality at the Science and Non-Duality Conference 2 years ago in Marin County, California. It's a big event. It's 500 people and paid $500 for 5 days and heard all the luminaries in the psychological world, the non-dual psychological world, and the non-dual physicists, and then all the spiritualists, all the neo guys. And I was the only guy around that was not neo. Dwight, I was traditional. So they asked me to propose a topic. And my proposed topic was, reality is non-dual, so what? Did I get accepted? I did not get accepted. They said, please propose a different topic. Because the purpose of this knowledge is for freedom. Who gives a damn if reality's non-dual or not? I want to be free. I want to be happy. And to get free and happy, I'm going to have some methodology here, aren't I? So just discovering that reality is non-dual is no big deal. Pack it in, boys. Come and listen to us. We'll show you. We'll prove to you that you are non-dual and that the reality is non-separate from you. And that you're free of all the objects appearing in you. That's what discrimination's about. Because existence has these two weird categories. It's called satya, the truth, awareness, me, awareness, and what? And the objects appearing in me. And those, the objects and the subjects seem to be different, don't they? It doesn't. Isn't that how it seems? See, to say that the subject and objects are non-separate is a problem, isn't it? Because that's not how I perceive reality. When I'm talking to you, it looks like you're over there, and you looks like I'm sitting over here, right? But hey, I'm not here and you're not there. What? What? What are you talking about? I'm not there and you're... I'm not here and you're not there. What does that mean? See? Well, we've got to prove to you that actually that's true. The appearance of duality notwithstanding. Because our whole experience is dualistic, isn't it? That's how we experience things, and we believe our experience. We actually take what we experience to be reality. Now, if that was a good way to go about things, we wouldn't suffer, would we? But that's not a good way to go about things, because when you take your experience to be reality, you suffer. When you understand that how you experience things, that the way experience presents reality to you is not how it actually is, then your suffering stops. To do that, you need discrimination. Discrimination just doesn't mean parity, and it's all one, or I'm not the doer, or I'm so not here, or all of these funny teachings that you hear nowadays. It has to be an understanding what the subject is, what the object is, what the relationship between the subject and object is. And you're going to hear this over and over and over again in different ways. All of the teachings of Vedanta prove the equation that the subject and the object are one, but that the subject's free of the object, and the object's what? Depend upon the subject. All of the teachings are going to prove the same thing. We need a whole bunch of teachings in our toolbox, because the way you see reality is complex. And your ignorance is intelligent. Ignorance is hardwired, believe me, as you well know. It's persistent and it's intelligent. You say ignorance is intelligent? Oh yeah, it is. Because ignorance is consciousness under the spell of ignorance. And consciousness is awareness, and it's intelligent. But when it's under the spell of ignorance, boy, it's even more intelligent. It's going to keep you tied down and bound and locked up in this tight little cocoon, of limitation that's producing this suffering. So we need to get this clear. And all of the teachings you're going to need. So why Vedanta really is superior to the modern teachings, because there is a whole toolkit. We have a complete toolkit. When you hear all of these teachings, the 3 states, the 3 gunas, the Karma Yoga, all of these teachings, when you get them all clear in your mind, then you're ready to go. You can get under the hood and start fixing that car. And the prime teaching is what? It's discrimination. So this is the one that sets you free. That's why it's the crown jewel. That's why it's the most important jewel in the crown is what? The discrimination that sets you free. So Shankara says, the first verse is Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tama Gocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. They have, that's the first verse in Sanskrit, and I've translated it here. The traditional thing is the teacher chants the verse and the students chant it back. Now we don't know Sanskrit. I've memorized a few of the really beautiful verses, so just to show you where it comes from and so forth, you won't be able to chant them back. So we've translated it into English. You don't have to worry about the Sanskrit. I throw it in from time to time just to, authenticate the teaching here so that you know it's not Ramji coming up with his clever, take on Vedanta, his own person. People say, what is your teaching, sir? Well, I don't have a teaching. I have 0 teachings. I'm a big 0. I'm just awareness, and that's it. I don't have any teachings. I don't need any teachings. I teach Vedanta. And Vedanta is all laid out. I have no leeway here. I have no freedom. As if I'm a teacher, I just present the methodology. All I know is the methodology of this teaching. So that's all I do. It's not my teaching. So if you don't like it, don't blame me. Okay? I want to be loved. So please love me. Even if you don't like it, blame the rishis, blame the sages, and ultimately blame consciousness, your own self, if you don't like it. Because this teaching came directly from the self. Through these great sages, these rishis. And the beauty of it is nobody put their name on it. Shankar he says, this is not my teaching. He says very clearly, I'm just a link in the tradition. He got it from his guru, and who's his guru? Govindam Paramanandam. Govindam, he says, I honor the teacher, the limitless self. And his teacher, his actual physical teacher, was called Govindacharya. Acharya means a teacher, and Govinda means the one who keeps the light. The keeper of the light. The keeper of the light is the self. So leave me personally out of this. This is just Govinda. This is just awareness speaking through me these teachings. That's what we're saying here. So I honor the teacher, the limitless self, right, whose nature is bliss, who cannot be objectified by the senses and the mind, who is known through the teachings of the Upanishads. He's pointing it out here. This is known through the teachings of the Upanishads. Whose nature is bliss. Okay, we want to get this one out of the way right now. I just got an email. I just wrote it a couple of days ago. Between what the word bliss is, what that means. That's a big one. And the way it's come down to us is that it's some kind of happy, huggy, warm, fuzzy, smiley, goody, num. Huh? That's supposed to be bliss. That word for that is called ananda. A-N-A-N-D-A. Ananda. And there's 3 kinds of that bliss. That's experiential bliss. Priya, Moda, and Pramoda. Priya is when you think of something that gives you pleasure. You think of a beautiful man or a woman. Say you're lonely. You know, you're feeling lonely, and you think of a beautiful man or a woman. That gives you pleasure, just the very thought, doesn't it? Just to contemplate on the image of that person makes you feel really good. And then suddenly an approximation of that image appears in your life. That's your fantasy. They get it, and suddenly approximation, and they sit down at the table next to you. And suddenly what? The bliss is amped up, isn't it? Wow. Woo! Maybe God's going to put me together with my fantasy. And you start to feel excited. It actually, chemistry starts to, change. Because that's called moda. Moda is the second stage of this experiential bliss. It's getting intense. It's feeling pretty good. Feeling great, in fact. And then what? Suddenly you start talking. And then when it's your place or mine, when you get to that point, and you lock the door and turn out the lights, that's called pramoda. You get oneness with the object that you love, that you desire. That's called experiential bliss. And people have this notion that getting enlightenment is going to be like some big orgasm. Okay? Forget it. Okay? The cosmic orgasm thing, you hear that. It's one of the big myths out there. That enlightenment's going to give you permanent experiential orgasmic ananda. Well, that's not the bliss we're talking about here, okay? That's a mistranslation of the word ananta. It's the experiential translation of the word ananta. The self is ananta. Ananta means has no end. The self being unborn, it has no end. So it means what? Limitless. There's no statement about how you feel. What? So this bliss is what? The bliss of knowing that you're not limited. See, all this anxiety and confusion because I think I'm limited. I think I'm small. Suddenly what? I find out that I'm not limited, that I have no limits, that no experiences can what? Touch me? Well, maybe at the first when you discover that, you'll jump for joy. But after a while, what? It's going to be pretty natural. It's not going, you're not going to walk around with a sappy, I'm blissful smile. You're not going to necessarily walk around with a sappy, I am blissful smile. You're just going to have a sense of absolute, rock solid confidence. Just a sense of rock solid adequacy. You will just feel adequate to deal with whatever life throws at you. That's the bliss they're talking about here. Doesn't mean pain isn't going to come. It doesn't mean joy isn't going to come. It doesn't mean your face is going to go through all sorts of different changes. And your life isn't going to go through all sorts of different changes. All of this stuff that's taking place in this part of reality is going to continue as before. But I'm going to have this absolute serenity and confidence to be able to what? Deal with anything with what? Aplomb. Without getting disturbed. And once that knowledge is firm or steady, my emotional, my vasanas, my hang-ups are going to but gradually disappear, and I will feel happier and happier most of the time. You can get up to 80, 95, 90% happiness. experiential bliss, feel-good bliss. Right? Once what? The Rajasic and Tamasic, the negative vasanas have been burned out by what? Staying with this knowledge that I'm the self. But the knowledge of the self does not immediately guarantee ha 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 ha, smiley smiley, happy happy bliss. This is very important to understand. It's non-experiential. Knowledge has a huge bliss component. If the knowledge is absolutely firm and you realize yourself, then you're always blissful. But your body and mind, what? Because it's the self experiencing itself. That's the bliss we're talking here. But that's experienceless experience. It's a paradox. When we get to this kind of bliss, we enter the world of paradox. We can't talk about it directly. Something that only comes from knowing or understanding. Anyway, so this self is what? Limitless bliss, limitless knowledge, limitless adequacy. Adequacy is a good word. Because we all feel inadequate. Some part of us has this feeling of being inadequate, isn't it? Not up to the task. If you want things and you fear things, it means you don't feel adequate. Everybody seems to want something and fear something. When you're adequate, your fears and your desires disappear. What's to want? What's to be afraid of? I can deal with whatever comes up. I can handle anything that comes up. Why? Because I'm adequate. I'm capable of doing it. As what? As awareness. So I honor the teacher, the limitless self, whose nature is bliss, who cannot be objectified by the senses and the mind. What's that mean? That means you can't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, feel it, or think it. The mind, the senses and the mind and the intellect, they require objects for their knowledge. They require objects. For you to see something physically, with your eyes, you've got to have objects, don't you? The eyes are what make objects known. For a feeling, to know what you're feeling, to somebody's feeling, say you're in a relationship with somebody, to know what they're feeling, you need what? A heart. You need emotions. Those emotions are the instrument for gaining knowledge of what a person is feeling. To understand what I'm saying intellectually, to understand these ideas, I need what? An intellect. So the intellect is the means for knowing the object, which are thoughts. So thoughts and feelings and sensations, are appropriate objects for the senses, the mind, and the intellect. They all require objects. They're in that subject-object duality there. But what about the self? How is the self going to be known? Because the self, it says here, can't be objectified. You can't turn yourself into an object. Try to do that. Try to take yourself and turn it into an object. How can you do that? No, you'd have to be somebody other than you behind you to what? Turn you into an object. But that would be yourself, wouldn't it? That would be doing that. And then there's another self behind that would be doing that? No. There's only one self, and it can't be turned into an object. There's nobody looking over your shoulder at you. The buck stops with you. So these instruments that I have for knowing myself are what? Are not suitable. They're not work. It's very important to understand this. In chapter 2 of my book is we have to take the piss out of these experiential guys because they're saying you can experience the self. Oh, you'd have heard that. Oh, Vedanta, that's all intellectual knowledge. I want experiential knowledge. Hey, the self is not experienceable. This is kind of hard when I told you this is provocative, huh? This is a challenge right here. Right off the bat, they're shooting a shot across the bow of you people who want some kind of experience. You want to experience something, but hey, the self is not experienceable. It's telling you right here. Why? Because it's beyond the scope of the means of knowledge that you have been given by God. Consciousness has evolved these means for what? The mind, the intellect, and the ego, and the senses, for the knowledge of objects. That's what they're for, but they don't work for the subject. So God made a mistake, I guess. Huh? I'm tempted to tell my Kalki Avatar story here because it's funny, but somebody might think I'm taking the piss out of him. But Kalki claims that I'll tell it anyway. And please, it's just a good joke. Okay, don't. Kalki says that, evidently he must have known that you can't see, you can't experience the self unless your brain's reversed. So he said, you come to me and I'll reverse your brain and then you can see the self. You can turn around and have a look at the self. Well, that's basically what yoga does. But you won't see the self directly. Why not? Because the self can't be objectified. So right at the very beginning, the very first verse here, he's telling you, you've got to get over this notion that this thing that you're looking for is something that you're going to experience at some later time or in some other dimension or through some other means. Because the means you have for experiencing it are not suitable. This is why all of your experiences of samadhi and non-duality and the self, what? Haven't set you free. Because they weren't experiences of yourself, they were experiences of the reflection of yourself in your mind. And when your mind changed, the experience changed, and the knowledge changed, and you lost the connection with yourself, and you lost the understanding of yourself. Because you were experiencing only the reflection of the self in what? Some part of Maya here, where experience is taking place. This is just a big, big issue here. Big, terribly important point. We can't get on with these teachings as long as you're looking for some special experience. See, what Vedanta says is that reality is non-dual awareness. In other words, there's only reality, there's only one thing here. That thing is awareness, and that thing is yourself. No matter what. That's all that's taking place here. So what? So what's the conclusion? What's the logic? I'm already experiencing myself. Every single second, I'm experiencing myself. What else are you experiencing? Are you ever experiencing anything other than yourself? No. No. If you don't accept that the contention that reality is non-dual, then maybe that this experiential notion is going to work. But our contention is that what? Reality is non-dual awareness. There's only one principle operating here, and that's awareness. The what? Appearance of duality notwithstanding. So we're going to have to like knock off this experiential idea as we go. Okay, so if I'm already experiencing the self 24/7, and the instruments that I have are not suitable for experiencing it, then how am I going to know it? Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are going to know it, because that's what self-knowledge is. Self-knowledge means you're definitely going to know yourself. But you're not going to know it what? Through these instruments. This is a subtle point, mind you. Please pay. I'm taking a lot of time on this. You have to get this really. You're definitely going to know it, but you're not going to know it with these instruments. You're going to know it what? As your own nature, by its own self. And how is that going to happen? Because knowledge requires a means. Knowledge requires a means. Knowledge just doesn't float in out of nowhere. Like as we said earlier, to know sights and smells and tastes and sounds, I need senses. To know feelings, I need what? A heart. I need emotions. To know thoughts, I need an intellect. Those are my means of knowledge for objects. Well, it's also true that I need a means of knowledge for awareness. Because my problem is I don't know who I am. My intellect is what? Ignorant. The knowledge is taking place here. My intellect doesn't, that self, my intellect, self's intellect, is apparently ignorant and doesn't know that it's limitless awareness. So it's going to have to what? Know. But the instrument, it's not going to work, and the emotions are not. I'm going to feel it. Oh, I'd like to feel awareness. I want to love awareness. Oh, I got to feel it. Please, I get those letters sometimes. Please, Ramji, please stop all this talk. Just tell me how to feel awareness. People at emotional level, they want to feel it. Well, you're not going to feel it. I'm sorry. You're not going to taste it either. Because it's the one that's tasting through your senses. It's the one that's behind your senses that's tasting the object through the senses. So the senses can taste the objects, but what they can never taste the subject, me. Because I'm hidden behind the senses. I'm hidden behind the mind. I'm hidden behind the intellect. I'm looking through the intellect, thinking the intellect's thoughts. I'm what? Functioning through the mind, feeling the feelings of the mind. So these things are not going to get up to here. So how is this going to work then? How am I going to know this? Through what? Through the teachings of the Upanishads. Through the teachings of the Upanishads. Okay, fair enough. How do those Upanishads deliver knowledge? How do they do it? They don't work like this. Then how do they do it? Knowledge is, the self is always present, isn't it? Is there any time when you're not present? Huh? Good. We don't have to go through the Be Here Now teachings.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
What's in deep sleep? I think I'm not present when I'm in very deep sleep.
Well, you're definitely, if you're in deep sleep and you're enjoying yourself there, and somebody, yeah, you are, because somebody, and they turn on, like I just had it happen last night, they kind of turned on the pump in my apartment building. Starts. I was not happy. Why was I not happy? Because I was present, enjoying myself. Not Ramji. Ramji wasn't there. I was there enjoying my own bliss. And when that bliss was separated and I became Ramji again, I was very unhappy. Because I was separated from my own experience of my own nature. So you're definitely there in deep sleep. You're just not there as the person that you think you are in the waking state. That's all. We'll explain that when we get to the teaching on and that's in a good hour, maybe an hour and a half teaching of the Mandukya Upanishad, and explains the 3 states of experience. But you're definitely there in deep sleep. So how does Vedanta work then? Okay, that's the point. Here we are. How does Vedanta work? Knowledge is nothing but the removal of ignorance. The self is always present. You're always present. So there's no problem there as far as the object is concerned. What is the problem? Ignorance is the problem. In other words, and what is ignorance? It's the notions, the ideas that I have that are what? Not in harmony with my nature. I have beliefs and opinions about myself that are not in harmony with who I am, that are not true to who I am. Knowledge should be true to its object. This is a scripture. You don't see a dog here, do you? You see a dog? Does anybody see a dog or a cat? No. You see a scripture. Why? Because the knowledge you have of this scripture is true to the object that's here. So no problem. You've got a problem if it's a dog or a cat. But how about my knowledge of myself? Is my knowledge of myself that I'm limitless? Is that my knowledge of myself? Nope. In other words, I'm not seeing what is there. I'm seeing something else. I'm ignorant of my nature. If you actually saw what was there, you wouldn't say you were limited. You wouldn't say you were inadequate. You wouldn't say you were incomplete. You wouldn't say you were separate. You wouldn't want things, and you wouldn't be frightened of things. If you saw what was there, but you're not seeing what's there. That means ignorance is operating in you. And what a means of knowledge does, just like the eyes remove ignorance of physical objects, don't they? Just like those eyes remove ignorance of physical objects, Vedanta is the eyes for what? Awareness. It's the third eye. You need a third eye. Okay, it doesn't mean you go to Tibet and have an operation and they uncover the eye that's hidden in there. They take off the skin. And then you got the third eye. That was Lobsang Rampa. That was his thing. People actually thought that there was a place in Tibet where you could go and get the skin taken off and the third eye would come, and then you could see the spiritual world. These 2 eyes being for the physical world, and then the third eye for the spiritual world. Well, hey, it makes a good story, but the third eye is Vedanta. It's called Jnana Chakshuhu. Chakshu means eye, and Jnana means knowledge. It's the eye of knowledge. So knowledge removes ignorance, and what does it do? Well, how does that work? We just what? Unfold the teaching of reality step by step. We just unfold it, and what? The vision of non-duality appears in your mind. You are forced, if you're paying attention, if you're listening properly. We said you need to listen. If you're listening properly, as that teaching unfolds, the vision of non-duality will occur. The ignorance will be stripped off for you. Yes, sir.
We don't do it with the intellect. This learning and all this process, not something in the intellect.
The intellect just needs to be clear and still and listening, and the teaching does the work for you. It's a different means of knowledge. Yeah, it's done to the intellect by the teaching, wielded by the teacher. If you could undo your own ignorance, you'd do it, wouldn't you? But you need a valid means of knowledge, and this is a proven means of knowledge, and you need somebody, a teacher, who can what? Wield this means on you. Once it's been wielded on you, you can wield it on yourself. So what these teachings do is just unfold the logic of your own experience and what? Reveal the knowledge that is already in you. And you become your own guru. If you're not set free immediately by the teaching, by hearing the teaching. Highly qualified people can get set free simply by hearing the teaching once or twice. And then the knowledge does all the work. Then you don't have to do any work. But if you still have obstacles, in other words, you still feel limited and inadequate and incomplete, if you have attachments and so forth and so on to various things in you, then you'll have to what? Keep teaching yourself, keep inquiring, using these teachings as a means of knowledge until you've dissolved that block, that belief or an opinion that's standing in the way of the appreciation of yourself as limitless, non-dual, actionless, ordinary, ever-present awareness. So this means that the teachings of the Upanishads is what? Is Vedanta. For Vedanta, you need to have what? A teacher. And we're going to see you're going to need qualifications. First of all, I need to understand the value, as he says here, of being here as a human being. What a rare privilege it is. And then secondly, you're going to discuss the qualifications that are necessary for this knowledge to take place. Again, more bad news. This is just one course, one solid bundle of bad news. This is why Ramji is not that popular. Because people hate bad news. They want to hear the feel-good stuff. They don't want to hear that it's all wonderful and all cushy and warm and fuzzy, and all I need to do is this or that, and everything will be okay. And I don't have to work too hard. But we're saying you're going to have to work hard. There's a lot of bad news you're going to have to assimilate. But if you're a mature person, you're ready to do the work, and you're ready to hear the bad news. Maybe I should yes, sir.
Just one question.
Shraddha.
About faith.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, that's good. You're anticipating. Try to hold your questions, because this teaching's a setup. It's a setup. We provoke you and we answer the question. And if you're following, it's good that you're asking questions. It means you're following. Usually all the questions that are asked are usually are coming up within the next one or two verses. We already figured out. We provoke the question and then we remove the doubt as we go. It's a very, very beautiful process. I mean, it's so scientific. It's unbelievable how it works. It just step by step digs this ignorance out, lays it to rest, and then digs the next little bit out and lays it to rest. And then we just, at the end of the teaching, always in the tradition, we go back and chant the first verse and start over again. In other words, it's a never-ending thing. What else do you have to do anyway? Huh? With your life? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with your mind? Your mind's thinking 24/7, isn't it? When do you ever stop thinking? Why not use your mind for this? It's a noble pursuit. It's a beautiful pursuit. It'll make you beautiful, it'll make the world beautiful. And the more you engage in it, the more love you put into it, the more beautiful you're going to become, that's all. And the more blessed the world's going to be, because what? You're going to remove one problem from the world, which is you. Huh? I meant to give us a break after about an hour, and are you all right? Do you want to? Can you sit for a few more minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll just do the next verses 2 to 5, and then tomorrow we'll start with the verse 7, the qualifications. Value of a human birth. I mean, it doesn't seem very valuable, does it? I mean, there's 8 billion of us and counting, and it's like, how valuable is it? I mean, within a half a mile of here, you can buy a human being for $100 and do with them what you want. That's the truth. $100, 5,000 rupees will buy you a human being, a slave. So how valuable is human life? Well, it's valuable. And you need to appreciate the value of this human birth, or the Vedanta is not going to work for you. So we have always at the beginning, Shankar is very clear about this. He lays out how important it is to appreciate the fact that we're here, and what a beautiful life it is, and how valuable it is. And then the quest for moksha is going to be quite simple. It is by the grace of the self that life's highest blessing is gained. He said it's the highest blessing of life to what? Become a human being. You could be what? A mosquito, couldn't you? You could be a pig. There's other options for jivas, for individuals. There's a lot of life out there. So you could be any one of those things. But you get to be a human being. Now that's a certain advantage to that. I understand there's a disadvantage, there is a downside. But there is what? The disadvantage, the advantage is that you can know who you are. None of these other creatures can know who they are. Ramana's cow notwithstanding. Ramana claimed his cow, who he was. And Baba Muktananda said his elephant knew who he was. I don't know if these Indian saints get special kinds of animals or not, but no other life form is capable of understanding who they are. Because you need an intellect to do that. None of them have developed intellects. They have rudimentary intellects, but they're not self-conscious, so they can't understand who they are. So they're just operating programs. They're just programs that are operating. They're macrocosmic vasanas that are just imprints by Ishvara, by consciousness, operating macrocosmic ignorance, making things function in certain patterns. But they're not capable of knowing who they are or being free. You know, the other thing, you've seen it where you have a bird, it's the little canary, and he's in the cage all his life. And somebody opens the door, and the canary won't go out the cage. He could fly free, but he won't go out. Think about it. He's not a thinking being. He's not a discriminating being. He doesn't understand. He doesn't have the capacity to understand what it means to be free. We're the only creatures that have the capacity to understand what it means to be free and to gain freedom. How cool is that? And what? Being endowed with a burning desire for freedom. Whoa! Okay, that eliminates what? How many of those billions of people out there have a burning desire to be free? 1%? I doubt it. 1% of a billion is what? 100,000? A million? Huh? I don't know how to put it. It's not a lot. No, everybody says they want to be free. It's fashionable to say I want to be free. But when push comes to shove, I cling on to my little petty little life and all my little attachments and desires and all my stuff. I'm really not going to ready to let go of any of this stuff. I want to keep all this and be free. Isn't it? How many really, really, really want to be free? So much so that you just what? You're ready to suffer make any sort of sacrifice. This is what he's talking about here. Because as long as you think that there's any solution here in this samsara, as long as you believe there's one solution here, you're just not going to get to here. You'll still hang on. And everybody's got that little thing in the back of their mind. They think just around the corner, Mr. and Mrs. Wright's going to show up. I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to get the good job. I'm going to, blah, 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 huh? Isn't it? My relationship will really work. Huh? You keep hoping. Oh yeah, I do want to be free. Yeah, but, you keep, every day you wake up and you keep thinking, well, maybe today's my day. Maybe it's my lucky day. Burning desire means you've had it. You've had it. You know very well this is a zero-sum game. Zero-sum game means what? You can't win. My father used to say, I didn't realize how wise he was till later on. Because that was what he was always saying. Jim, you can't win. Huh? I love my dad. He was a great guy. And he always used to say that. When I was a kid, I didn't get what he meant. But yeah, you can't win here. Zero-sum means the upside and the downside cancel each other. You pay for everything here. There's no free lunch here. There's no free ride here. You want a relationship? You get intimacy. What do you lose? Freedom. Huh? Huh? Yeah. You got your relationship, but you're not free. You're tied to that other person. And as soon as you start acting like you're free, your relationship goes south. The other person doesn't want to hear that. Suddenly there's problems. You got freedom? Oh yeah, I'm free as anything, but then I'm lonely. I don't have nobody, no pillow talk, nobody to love me. Huh? You can't win here. This is when you understand that. When you really get that, then this burning desire to be free comes up. The joy is not in the object. How about that teaching? Why do we give that joy is not in the object teaching? We're all snookered by this idea that there's some object here that's got enough joy to make me happy. But is the joy in the object? Nope. The joy is not in the object. There's no joy in the object. Why? If the joy was in the object, then the same object would give everybody the same joy, wouldn't it? Yeah, because it's in the object. But it's not in the object. Where's the joy coming from? From me. From awareness, bliss. The happiness that I feel when I get what I want is not coming from the job or the money or the husband or the wife or the kids or the whatever position or whatever it is, the fame. The joy's not coming from the objects, it's coming from me. Why does it look like it's coming from the object? And why am I fooled? Because Maya makes me think what? That the joy's there. Why? Because when I get what I want, the desire or the fear that's prompting, that's that's generating this need for the object, that desire or fear is removed, and the bliss of myself floods my mind, and I experience happiness. But I don't realize what's happening, and I associate the joy with the object, and then I become attached to the object. I believe that the joy is in the object. And a mature person is somebody who's realized the joy is not in the object. The joy is coming from the subject. And when you realize that, what are you going to do? You're going to desire to be free of all those damn objects. Because the pleasure or the joy that's coming from these objects, it's definitely there, but it's no joy at all. Why? Because it disappears. As soon as the object changes, or my relationship to the object changes, what happens to the joy? It becomes suffering. It becomes pain. It becomes sorrow. And immediately another desire springs up behind that. And now I'm what? Definitely suffering because I want something. So this is a mature person he's talking about here. He's getting around to qualifications right away. When you see that the joy is not in the object, when you see that life's a zero-sum game, what are you going to do? You better search for the self, baby. Huh? You better go for where the joy is. There is joy. It is joy. Life is joyous. It's fabulous because of this, because of who I am. But as long as I'm chasing here, forget it. You know, my guru, he was a great teacher. He had many, many enlightened disciples. And very often people would leave. It just, it was too much for him. And the devotees would say to him, the disciples would say to him, Swamiji, why don't you get him back? Because he was a great man, a man of great persuasion and influence and power and wisdom and compassion. And if he'd really asked them to come back, they'd have come back. Because everybody loved and respected this guy. And he said, no. He said, it's true. He was not a modest man. He said, it's true, I'm a great teacher. No problem there. But Maya is a much better teacher. Let them go. Let them just bump their head up against the reality a little bit longer, and they'll get humble enough, soft enough, and open enough, and appreciative enough that they'll come back and they'll be ready to swallow this knowledge. So you need to have, what does it say, a burning desire for liberation. And, oh my God, more bad news. That's not good enough either. I need a relationship with a qualified teacher. My God, never ends, does it? It's going to get worse. No, really. The whole list here. All this bad news. Anyway, what's a qualified teacher? Oh my God. Okay, listen. If you've got teachers, if you love other teachers, this is not personal, okay? If you've got bhakti for some teacher, please keep your bhakti, keep your love for that teacher. We want you to have love for your teacher. Please, do it. This is not a criticism or a complaint or an argument about any teacher. This is just about what a qualified teacher is. We need to get that clear. Because any Tom, Dick, and Harry who's had a third-rate epiphany can hang out a shingle, build a website, and say, I'm the avatar of the Aquarian age. Please come to me, I can enlighten you. Look at the web, get on the web. It's embarrassing. These little teenagers, they've still got acne. And they're the great Lord of Yoga. The great Lord of Yoga. He's got kid's barely out of puberty. He's going to teach you who you are. And we're so gullible. I mean, and we want to believe. This spiritual world's just ripe for con men. Because we're happy to give our confidence to anybody who shows any kind of chutzpah. People love people who have balls, even if they're idiots. Huh? I'd like to have balls, even though I'm an idiot. You know, isn't it? So you're ready to give your confidence to these people who say they are, but the qualified teacher, right? Is, you know, we need to discuss what a teacher is. A qualified teacher, and we're very, very clear about this, is a Shrotriya and a Brahmanishta. Giving you the technical terms. This is not my opinion. Again, this is just Vedanta. A Shrotriya is somebody who has knowledge of the scripture. This is a scripture. That person knows the scripture inside and out and can teach the scripture. In fact, Shankara actually says that a person who knows the scripture and can teach it properly according to the methodology, and there's a method here, who can do that properly, you can gain enlightenment from that person even if he or she doesn't know who they are. That's odd, isn't it? Because if you're qualified, and we're going to get to the qualifications tomorrow, if you're qualified, just hearing the things, the scripture as it's meant to be, can set you free. But a teacher should be, hopefully, a Brahmanishta. Nishta means established in, means situated in. In what? In Brahman. Brahman means awareness. Brahman, just word, means limitless. Means awareness is limitless. So it means it's a person who should be situated in limitlessness as limitlessness. In other words, they should know they're not just experiencing the self, but what? The self experiencing the ego. A lot of egos say they're experiencing the self, but this Brahmanishta is the self experiencing the ego. Means what? His or her knowledge of his or her nature as awareness is steady, firm, it's situated. The knowledge is steady. And that gives the person the confidence, because their whole understanding is behind the teaching. Huh? So what are you going to get if you've got a Brahmanishta teaching the scripture who also understands the scripture? You're going to get a tremendously power-packed teaching. Because we teach not just by precept. A Shrotriya teaches by precept. He teaches you the teachings. But the teacher is an example. And if you see a free person teaching you, it gives you amazing confidence to accept that teaching as a reality. Because you know that that teacher was just a jerk like you one day. That's what happened to me. I went through it, all these gurus and did all these things and so forth. And I never met an enlightened person till I met my teacher. And I thought, my God, he's so grand and glorious. And I said, Swamiji, how could I ever be like you? He said, it's not like that. He said, I was a jerk just like you when I started. And you can see, Ramji, there's a jerk here. There's a big jerk here. Any jerk can get it. Is the point. We're not special or grand or glorious. Anybody can get this knowledge if you're qualified. And the teacher shows you that by the way they live. Their teaching is by the example. How they live, how they function. So for these teachers, don't just accept somebody because they say they're a teacher, they had some experience, or they've got some particular teaching. Observe those people. See how they live. Ramana is a great example. He was definitely a Brahmanishta. Why is Ramana such a shining example? Because of his life. His teachings were okay. He was not a Shrotriya, and there were a lot of contradictions. Because he was never a teacher. Ramana never thought of himself as a teacher. He was a great, great enlightened person. But he was not a Shrotriya. He was not a teacher. He never said he was. In fact, he said he wasn't. And he didn't sit down and he just spoke to people here and there, and many people got enlightened through him, but it was all personal. So then people recorded it, and then he said one thing to one person and then another thing to another person in a different context, and then you read both of them, and then you say, gee, was Ramana confused? Because he said this to now, and then he said that there. What's the contradiction? Like, for example, he said the self is in the hridaya, the heart is on the right side of the chest. He said that. And then, obviously, the self is not on the right side of the chest. But he said that. So a lot of people are like trying to figure out how to get to the self over here. I don't know quite how you do that. And later on, somebody asked him, and then he explained, no, that's just a method for like focusing your attention on a certain spot later on. Well, there are many, so on. The third eye. He said there's a city inside the mountain. Well, what did he mean? Well, we don't really know because, you know, if you take a bulldozer and dig out the mountain, we probably won't find a city inside there like we think a city is there. But he didn't explain that. Or he says his cow Lakshmi is enlightened. No, he never explained what he meant to say the cow Lakshmi is enlightened. Maybe he just meant that the cow is pure awareness. Did he mean that that specific cow was enlightened, like Ramana was enlightened? And if he did, what did that mean? See, he didn't explain it. Whereas the scripture explains it and gives you all the reasons. So, Ramana was a Brahmanishta, but he wasn't a Shrotriya. So here in Vedanta, you can be a Shrotriya and not a Brahmanishta and be a teacher. So we need to get this clear. And not only should you have a means of knowledge, you should have a valid means of knowledge. Get this clear. A valid means of knowledge is not your own experience. That's not a valid means of knowledge. That's valid for you, but that's not valid for anybody else. Understand? Swami Muktananda, before he got enlightened, he saw a blue pearl. Ever read that? Play of Consciousness? Huh? Yeah, in the Play of Consciousness. Yeah, probably he's an old guy. Most of you probably haven't read him. But I was in his ashram and I knew him. And before he got his moksha, he had this experience of a blue pearl. Somebody wrote me the other day, they had an experience of a blue spark. And they want to know if that was enlightenment. It was the same thing. It's a mystical experience that you have. Okay, that some people have. And so he said that before you get enlightened, you need to have this experience of a blue pearl, because that's what happened to him. He had all these people in the ashram who were all depressed because they weren't getting the experience of the blue pearl. They were all spending hours, days, weeks, and months meditating, doing all these weird practices to try to get the experience of the blue pearl, because they thought that they needed to have the experience of the blue pearl, because the Swami had the experience of the blue pearl, and that everybody was in enlightenment. Look, I had amazing experiences, but that doesn't mean you should go through what I went through to get what I got. Believe me, hopefully you don't have to. Experience is just specific to an individual and doesn't translate to other people. You can't communicate experience. I can't transfer my experience into you. I can transfer knowledge. Knowledge is like a candle. I can light your candle, mine doesn't go out, and the light goes the same in the other candle. Knowledge is transferable because knowledge is always good. And knowledge is beyond anybody's experience and beyond the experiencer itself. So I should have a valid means of knowledge. And a valid means of knowledge is one that has proven itself. If the Western spiritual world keeps up, in another few thousand years, they may get around to having a valid means of knowledge. But what would be the point? Because there's already a valid means of knowledge. Why reinvent the wheel? Plus, it's highly unlikely in Western culture because everybody's an individualist. And they all think the way they say it and their own particular slant on it is particularly unique and special because it's theirs. So you're never going to get everybody together and agree to throw out all the personal stuff and just leave us with this impersonal body of knowledge. You're not going to get that in the West because we're all individualists. But here, there's nobody's name is on this. If you look at the Upanishads, they just put names on it just to identify it. But nobody ever claimed this knowledge to be their own. In other words, it's not a matter of personal experience, it's just truth. And truth stands what? Above and beyond my own experience, always. And knowledge is something you can count on. Experience, you cannot count on it. Experience will tell you one thing 1 minute, and it'll tell you something else the next minute about the same topic. It's totally unreliable. So a teacher needs to be what? Established in the self as the self. That means they should not just experiencing the self, because you're always experiencing the self. They should know without a doubt that they're the self. That confidence should be there. That peace should be visible to you, and they should be able to what? Wield this means of knowledge effectively. And they need to be a compassionate person. They need to take their time. In our tradition, we do not believe in this exalted guru and a small disciple idea. The model for our tradition is called Bhagavad Gita and all of these texts. What is the Bhagavad Gita? How is knowledge transferred there? It's transferred by what? Through friendship. It's called Sakya Bhavaha. Krishna and Arjuna are friends. They're friends. We're going to see when we finish this is our introductory text. Then we're going to take the Bhagavad Gita. And those guys are friends. And in fact, Krishna, who's the guru, drives Arjuna's chariot. In other words, he's the driver or the taxiwala for the student. And he's taking orders from the student. How many of these modern gurus are doing that? Are in there in your life serving you, helping you in some sort of way, in a personal way? How many of them are doing that? No, they're all sitting up in front of you. They like to sit up high. They like to have you down low. They want worship and attention and adoration. They want all this phony respect. And then they're going to rain down and they're going to say, I know something you don't know. Do what I tell you to do, or do what I did, or something like that. That's not a communication. It doesn't work. It just makes you small and it makes them big. And it just reinforces this what? Dependency that you have. Now you what? You've transferred all of your worldly dependency onto a guru. Well, our job is to set you free. We don't want you dependent. When I met my guru, you know what he said? He said, sit down, shut up, pay attention, and we'll have you out of here as quick as possible because you're taking up valuable real estate that someone else could use. He said it just like that was quotation. He was just ruthless, this man. He was just totally honest. And I thought, wow, that's good, because I don't want to sit here the rest of my life worshiping you or being a seeker. I want to be you. I want to live like you. I want to be free like this. Definitely. I'm happy to. And I sat down, and it's hard for me to do that because I got a big mouth and a big ego. But I sat down and I shut up and I paid attention. Because I could see the freedom in every action and gesture and word of this person. I could see the freedom right there in front of me. And the words that were coming out matched what he was. And it's so easy. It just gives you this amazing confidence to know that it's possible. So, the teacher needs to be compassionate. and be willing to, like, listen to you. You're going to get, most of it you can get from the teaching. But sometimes you get stuck. And then the teacher should be there, and you should present your doubt to that person. Arjuna says to Krishna all the time, he's always questioning him. If you'll read that, you'll see in the text. He's always said, but first you said this, and now you say that. You're confusing me, he says. Huh? How many gurus can you talk to like that? They say, oh, you don't have any devotion. You're not surrendered. You can't talk to me like that. I'm not confusing you. That's your ego that's confused. You've got a problem. Let me bust your ego, and then you'll be fine. No. We want you to present your doubts, and we should be available to what? Satisfy you. Help you think through this, your problem, in what? With reference to this teaching. So that the next time that doubt comes out or that problem comes out, you can work your way through it. I don't want to answer your questions over and over and over again. Once or twice, maybe 3 times. If you don't get it after the 3rd time, then, I'm either a bad teacher or you're not qualified. But it's a communication here. It's a dialogue. So I want you to feel confident to talk to me if you have a question. Hold them as long as you can. If it's just burning and driving you crazy, then come up, because most of it will be answered. Most every question you have will get laid to rest here. There's a few that won't. There's some people, you'll only have my word for it, but there's about 5 or 6 people since I wrote the book and fixed up the new website, who told me that just the website and the book set them free. I think 5 or 6 people have told me that. And they weren't trying to impress me or anything like that. There were people I had no idea who they were, and they just told me exactly what happened. Because they were qualified. Most of them were in their 50s or 60s, had been around for a long time, had been in the spiritual world. They just had a few little doubts. Just a handful, maybe 1 or 2 in subtle doubts. And just to get it clear, boom, click, thank you very much. Not a big deal. Sometimes it takes a little more, so please ask me. I'll try as best I can to answer your question. Maybe I can't, but usually if it's in the ballpark or I can understand what you're saying, usually we can sort out your doubt. Okay, so tomorrow we'll take up verse 3.